If you're in a relationship and you feel that something isn't quite right, his distant attitude doesn't match his words, this contrast creates doubt within you. A sense of inconsistency begins to arise inside. Is it just paranoia, or is it a sign that he's simply manipulating you? According to the teachings of Carl Jung, the human mind cannot keep its intentions hidden for long. The subconscious always finds a way to express itself, whether through subtle movements, recurring behaviors, or even through silence. Imagine discovering clear signs that reveal when a man is not genuinely interested in you, but only in what he can gain from the relationship. The human mind operates through symbols and universal patterns, and relationships are no exception to this rule. Since ancient times, the stories repeat themselves. The person who controls makes promises and disappears when you need him most. He manipulates you with small displays of interest, making you believe you're close to achieving your desires. But in truth, he offers nothing genuine, and the most concerning part is that he knows exactly how to keep this plan going without you even realizing it. If you've experienced this before or think you're currently caught in this cycle, it's time to be prepared. You're about to learn 8 behaviors that reveal a man is using you without truly being interested in you. Some are so subtle they're hard to notice. Others are obvious, yet you may have trained yourself to ignore them. Are you seeing the signs, or are you choosing to avoid the truth? Stay with me until the end, because the 8th behavior is the one that captivates women the most in relationships where they will never be a priority. When a man is simply using you and doesn't show genuine interest, one clear sign is the absence of real commitment. At first, he may seem fascinating and charming, saying all the right things and showing up at just the right moments to keep your attention. But soon you realize that despite his occasional presence, there's always a lingering feeling of uncertainty, as if something just doesn't quite fit. According to Jung's teachings, this behavior reflects an internal conflict between what a person shows on the outside and what remains hidden in the subconscious. He rejects the idea of loneliness, yet he doesn't seek a serious relationship either. And it's exactly this back and forth between closeness and distance that keeps you trapped in his dynamic. The lack of clarity isn't accidental, it's a powerful psychological tool. As you try to understand his feelings, you become more and more emotionally involved, caught in the desire to win him over. The human mind tends to long for what feels out of reach. According to Jung, this could be interpreted as an expression of the archetype of illusion, a recurring pattern in the human psyche that leads us to idealize what we fear we may never attain. This person never openly expresses his emotions, but he drops just enough hints to keep you hooked. When questioned about the direction of the relationship, he avoids giving a direct answer. When asked to define his position, he chooses not to make hasty decisions and prefers to let things naturally unfold. However, this spontaneity only works in his favor. In reality, he has no specific destination in mind. He's simply extending a game in which he always wins, while you remain trapped in the illusion that one day he'll finally change. This kind of behavior has a profound impact on a woman's subconscious. Jung referred to the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine elements that exist within every individual. Women who get involved with men like this often carry a subconscious belief that love must be earned, that if they're patient and behave correctly, he will eventually recognize their worth. However, this is an illusion that carries significant risks. This man is not seeking love, but rather practical benefits. Convenience doesn't require commitment. It only needs your emotional availability. He feeds on your hope, knowing that as long as you continue to believe in the possibility of something more, you will keep settling for less than you deserve. At this point, Jung would ask, why are you willing to maintain this kind of bond? What inside of you keeps this pattern alive? The solution doesn't lie in him, but in something deeper within yourself. According to Jung, the shadow houses all our hidden suffering, fears, and beliefs that shape our decisions. Maybe you've developed a habit of confusing occasional attention with genuine affection. Maybe you're afraid of being alone, and that's why you accept any form of companionship, no matter how superficial or inconsistent it may be. But the truth is clear. Until you confront that hidden part within you, you will continue to attract men who use you and never truly commit. Independence often disguises itself as coldness and distance in the second behavioral pattern. At first, this man might appear confident, self-sufficient, and uninterested in conflict. But over time, it becomes clear that his independence is actually a wall that blocks genuine connection. According to Carl Jung, each person projects inner aspects of their psyche onto others. This particular man presents a facade of strength and detachment to hide his deep fear of real emotional commitment. He avoids intense emotional conversations, steers clear of honest dialogue, and when you try to get closer, he responds vaguely or deflects the topic. This emotional barrier isn't accidental. It serves the purpose of keeping you close without having to give anything in return. Once you begin to show your feelings, the psychological game becomes more evident. Showing affection makes him withdraw. When you bring up something that hurt you, he may accuse you of being too dramatic. Jung described a fundamental divide between what we present outwardly and what we hide inwardly. These individuals hold a deep internal contradiction. They seek female companionship without the weight of intimacy. They want someone to fulfill their temporary needs without any emotional strings attached. And what's most difficult is that the more you try to overcome the emotional wall and create something authentic, the more out of place you feel for wanting something deeper. This dynamic triggers a dangerous subconscious process. According to Jung, a woman's unconscious often seeks to heal emotional wounds through relationships. That's why some women are drawn to men who cannot reciprocate their feelings. There's a hidden belief that if they're persistent enough and prove their worth, he will eventually open up and see their uniqueness. But that transformation never comes. You were never the problem. This man doesn't have emotional wounds that can be healed by the love you offer. He has made a conscious choice to maintain that emotional distance because it serves him. Jung would ask, why does this emotional absence affect you so deeply? What causes you to accept a relationship where you're constantly chasing something that will never be within reach? You won't find the answer in him, but in the deepest layers of your personal emotional history. Perhaps it's fear of rejection. Or perhaps it's a subconscious belief that real love must be difficult in order to feel meaningful. However, the truth is that a man who truly cares about you does not leave you uncertain about his feelings. He doesn't build emotional walls that distance you from others. If you're experiencing such feelings, it might be time to stop trying to overcome that barrier and instead reflect on what drives you to keep pushing forward. The third behavior involves subtle manipulation disguised as charm. He never sets restrictions, never raises his voice, and rarely engages in direct confrontation. On the surface, he appears calm, self-assured, and even a bit indifferent, but gradually, you begin to sense that something is not quite right. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious human communicates through symbols and structures, using nonverbal cues, strategic omissions, and even silence to exert influence undetected. You constantly feel left behind, always trying to decipher his desires and striving to capture his attention. But the truth is, this mental game is calculated. He knows exactly how to make you feel insecure, without saying a word. The pattern repeats itself subtly. When you're joyful and full of energy, he grows distant. When you start to pull away, he returns with affection and vague promises. When you express discomfort, he downplays it, deflects the conversation, or makes you feel like you're overreacting. According to Jung, the human psyche contains many contradictions, and this type of person operates skillfully within that ambiguity. He offers just enough hope, but never the full sense of security you seek. In this way, your mind remains on constant alert, searching for signs, trying to understand his motives, creating an emotional connection that only strengthens the influence he has over you. The cruelest part of this dynamic is that the deeper your emotional investment, the harder it becomes to recognize the manipulation. Jung referred to the shadow as the hidden part of the personality that holds everything we reject about ourselves. Often, women in relationships with men like this carry a subconscious belief that they must earn love, prove their worth, and wait patiently to be truly appreciated. However, this man never meets your expectations because subtle manipulation isn't about reaching a goal, it's about maintaining control over you. The question Jung would invite us to reflect on is, why are you attracted to someone who constantly makes you feel insecure? What inside you has learned to associate emotional instability with passionate feelings? The subconscious can be deceptive. Sometimes we seek in others what we need to heal within ourselves. True love does not create anxiety, it doesn't make you question your self-worth, and it doesn't trap you in a state of constant uncertainty. If this person gives you just enough to keep you trying, it might be time to pause and ask yourself why you keep participating. The fourth behavior is marked by emotional unavailability, hidden beneath a facade of indifference. At first, he may seem calm, low maintenance, and content with any situation, but as the relationship progresses, you begin to notice a strange imbalance. While you give your energy, care, and effort to keep the connection alive, he simply receives, offering little to nothing in return. According to the teachings of Carl Jung, relationships are a reflection of our unconscious. If a man doesn't reciprocate your effort, it means you were never a priority for him, even though he will never admit it directly. Instead, he pretends everything is fine, taking advantage of your feelings without offering anything in return. The pattern becomes increasingly clear. When you're ready and available, he pulls away. When you grow tired and begin to distance yourself, he notices and wins you back with small gestures, just enough to reignite your hope. According to Jung, the human mind operates through repeating patterns, and this strategy of distancing and approaching is not accidental. He stays in this cycle because he knows that uncertainty creates emotional bonds. You find yourself constantly trying to maintain balance in the relationship, trying to understand his desires, and hoping for the moment when he will finally start to reciprocate. But that moment never comes, because he isn't invested in building something real. He's simply taking advantage of everything you give without making a true commitment. The lack of reciprocity might be mistaken as a personality trait. You might say he doesn't tolerate pressure or express his emotions differently. Jung warns us that in an unbalanced relationship, there's often a hidden truth we'd rather not face. If you're always the one making the effort, solving the problems, and sacrificing yourself to avoid confrontation, then you are not in a balanced partnership. The longer you remain in this dynamic, the more you get used to receiving less than you deserve, convincing yourself it's normal. The key question Jung would ask in this situation is, why do you keep devoting yourself to someone who never gives back in the same way? What part of you believes it's necessary to keep trying with someone who clearly isn't willing to give more than the bare minimum? The subconscious can trap us in negative patterns, but it can also be our key to freedom if we dare to confront it. You must seek a partner who acknowledges and reciprocates your efforts, where there is harmony and mutual respect in the relationship. If this person only takes without giving, then perhaps what needs to change is not him, but your decision to keep tolerating it. The fifth behavior involves subtle belittlement disguised as humor. At first, his light-hearted attitude may seem clever, fun, even charming, but over time you begin to realize that his comments about you aren't as harmless as they appear. He might mock your style, downplay your achievements, tell you that you could be doing more, or even compare you to other women casually. According to Jung's teachings, the human mind operates on multiple levels, and this behavior reveals more about the person who displays it than about you. Through seemingly innocent remarks, he expresses his own insecurities and desire for control, chipping away at your self-confidence and making you question your worth. The strategy is deceptive because it doesn't come across as a direct criticism. If you feel hurt by one of his jokes and try to express it with something like, "Wow, you're very observant," he shifts the focus and makes it seem as if you're the one overreacting. According to Jung, unconscious human behavior follows specific patterns, and this kind of emotional influence occurs when someone seeks to gain power without appearing aggressive. His aim is to generate insecurity in you, because an insecure woman is easier to manipulate. Without even noticing, you may start changing your behavior, your way of dressing, or even your thoughts to better align with what he deems acceptable or worthy of approval. The biggest threat lies in the fact that this form of belittling isn't always obvious. Sometimes you receive compliments with a hint of irony or hear subtle remarks that make you feel uneasy. According to Jung's teachings, how we are treated by others reveals much about what we've learned to tolerate within ourselves. If you find yourself justifying his behavior, thinking he's just joking or didn't really mean it, you may be overlooking a toxic cycle that has embedded itself in the relationship dynamic. Someone who truly values you would never resort to comments that diminish you, not even under the guise of humor or honesty. The question Jung would pose is, why are you willing to tolerate this kind of behavior? What inside of you leads you to overlook these remarks, even when you know they hurt? Often, from a young age, we are taught that love and criticism go hand in hand, that being loved means tolerating discomfort and adjusting ourselves to be accepted. But this belief must be unlearned. Real love strengthens you. It doesn't take your strength away. If a man makes you feel inferior, if he uses his words to diminish you instead of uplift you, then perhaps it's time to reflect on the fact that the problem does not lie within you, but in the way he chooses to treat you. The sixth behavior involves maintaining a calculated emotional distance. He doesn't give you his full attention, but he also doesn't seem entirely absent. There's an invisible barrier that keeps you apart and prevents you from truly connecting with him. According to Carl Jung's teachings, the human mind develops masks as a defense mechanism, leading some people to hide behind emotional walls in order to avoid deep connections. At first, he may come across as reserved or as someone who just needs time to open up. But as the days, weeks, or even months go by, you realize that this distance isn't temporary. It's a conscious decision. He always keeps part of himself hidden, and the more you try to get close, the more he pulls away. When you notice that he rarely shares personal or emotional things, you begin to see the psychological dynamic at play. You may know about his habits, preferences, or even his daily routine, but his fears, painful experiences, and deeper emotions remain out of reach. When you ask about his feelings, he gives vague answers, avoiding any real vulnerability. When you try to build a special connection, he might change the subject or make you feel like you're asking too much. Jung explained that some individuals avoid deep relationships because they fear what they might uncover within themselves. However, in this man's case, the emotional barrier isn't just a defense mechanism, it becomes a tactic. By maintaining that emotional distance, he actually motivates you to try harder to win him over, keeping you emotionally hooked in a nearly hypnotic way. The alternation between closeness and distance has a significant impact on your subconscious. According to Jung, the human mind tends to fill the voids of the psyche, creating an intense longing to understand and win over those who appear distant and inaccessible. You try a little harder, show more patience and understanding, hoping that you might eventually break through the barrier. However, the truth is that this limitation is not there by accident, it is what keeps the game functioning. He always maintains a certain level of emotional reserve because he knows that without it he would lose control over the dynamic of the relationship. The question Jung would invite us to reflect upon is, what drives you to chase someone who clearly doesn't want to be chased? What feeling inside you makes you believe this struggle is worth it? Sometimes we hold on to the subconscious belief that love must be difficult, that the harder we work for someone, the greater the reward. But that belief is misleading. Real love is not a maze where you must prove your worth at every turn. If you truly mattered to him, he wouldn't be keeping you at arm's length. Perhaps the real question isn't whether you should keep trying, but why you feel the need to try in the first place. The seventh behavior is emotional instability, a recurring pattern of broken promises and sudden changes. One moment he's affectionate and thoughtful, and the next he becomes distant and indifferent. One day he's talking about the future with enthusiasm, filling you with hope, and the next he acts as though none of it ever happened. According to Jung, the human being constantly struggles between the image we project outward and our true inner emotions. This man masters that duality, weaving closeness and distance together in order to keep you emotionally hooked. He doesn't want to let you go, but he also won't commit to a real relationship. This traps you in a cycle of emotional highs and lows, never knowing which version of him will show up. The inconsistency isn't a coincidence. According to Jung, people tend to see in others the parts of themselves they cannot face. In this psychological game, he demonstrates a desire for control disguised as spontaneity. Although he claims he doesn't like labels, prefers to live in the moment, and avoids drama, he is, in fact, orchestrating everything carefully. He creates an atmosphere of uncertainty that compels you to prove your worth. You try harder to get his attention, while he increasingly oscillates between tenderness and indifference. You cling to the hope that if you do everything right, you'll bring back the version of him that seemed in love. But the effect this has on your subconscious is deeply harmful. Jung discussed how recurring emotional patterns shape our relationships, creating a subconscious need to be validated. Because of this lack of consistency, you start blaming yourself, thinking maybe you weren't charming enough or that you said the wrong thing. But the truth is, the fault is not yours. It is part of his calculated manipulation. He never intended to offer you emotional stability. He thrives on the control he has over your emotions, on how he can shift your mood with a single gesture or expression. The question Jung would raise here is, what attracts you to someone who keeps you in a constant state of uncertainty? What inside you makes insecurity seem more appealing than stability? Sometimes the subconscious links emotional instability with passion, as if challenges increase the value of love. But this mistake carries serious consequences. Real love is not about solving riddles or decoding mysteries. If he truly cared, you wouldn't feel the constant need to prove yourself. And perhaps the greatest truth you need to accept is this: his inconsistency is not due to immaturity or fear of commitment. It is a choice. And now it's your turn to choose, to stop tolerating it. Selfishness disguises itself as freedom in the eighth behavior. He always puts his own desires above yours, though he does it so subtly that for a while you may think it's normal. If he wants to hang out with his friends, he does. If he needs space, he withdraws. Whenever you ask for something, he finds a reason to justify himself. He talks about autonomy, about how relationships shouldn't impose limits. But in reality, that freedom only benefits him. In contrast, you constantly find yourself in a delicate position, trying not to appear rigid, striving to be empathetic, while he continues his routine as if your presence were merely a convenient circumstance. According to Carl Jung's teachings, the ego is skilled at crafting stories that justify our actions. This man uses the notion of freedom as an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for offering anything beyond what is convenient to him. However, the freedom he defends follows a peculiar pattern. When you seek time for yourself, it bothers him. When you begin to distance yourself, he senses it and suddenly reappears, almost as if by instinct, not with real commitment but with small actions that reignite your hope for the future. He expresses that he's missed you, says he hasn't stopped thinking about you, and claims he wants to see you. But as soon as he feels you're emotionally invested again, he returns to his selfish and distant behavior. According to Jung, some individuals do not experience genuine love. Instead, they seek validation of their own existence through others. Although this man values your presence, he is not willing to give up his complete freedom. And so you become trapped in a cycle where you are always the one who must adapt, who must give in while he does nothing to keep the relationship balanced. The greatest danger of this kind of behavior is that it makes you feel like you are the one responsible for every difficulty in the relationship. If you question something, he labels you as controlling. If you express pain, you're told you're exaggerating. If you set boundaries, you're seen as unreasonable. According to Jung's teachings, we carry unconscious patterns within us that repeat throughout our lives. Sometimes, women who tolerate this type of behavior were raised to believe that asking for love and commitment is excessive. But that belief must be changed, because real love should not feel like a burden. You are not obligated to always be the one making the effort, while the other person never moves toward you. In this situation, Jung would ask, why do you continue to settle for less than what you truly deserve? What within you values freedom more than your own emotional needs? Healthy relationships are not built on strategies, calculated distance, or hollow commitments. Authentic love is marked by the harmony that arises when two people decide to share their lives. If you feel like you're the only one constantly making an effort, the harsh truth may be that he was never truly present. Now it's time for you to decide. A man who is merely using you will never be honest with you. He doesn't need to be. His actions are the reflection of who he really is, and if you pay close attention, you'll notice the same pattern repeating: lack of commitment, emotional distance, subtle manipulation, and selfishness disguised as freedom. According to Carl Jung, the human mind tends to project onto others the aspects we prefer not to acknowledge within ourselves. If you find yourself in such a situation, it might be time to reflect. What part of me still believes I deserve something less than what real love looks like? When you identify these patterns, you gain the power to change them, which is excellent news. Love shouldn't be a struggle where you must prove your worth, nor a game in which the other person always holds the power. As Jung said, discovering oneself leads to freedom, and true change begins when you choose to no longer settle for less than you deserve. The right man does not leave you uncertain, does not make you question your value, and does not trap you in a cycle of constantly seeking validation. He is simply there, present. If what you heard was helpful and gave you the insight you were looking for, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Doing so helps more people gain access to this knowledge and break free from these harmful relationship patterns. If you've gone through something similar, let us know in the comments and feel free to share this video with anyone who needs to hear it. Until the next recording.